that says that it's a peaceful liberation of Tibet, but we know it's a military occupation. China says, as a member of the big family of the Chinese nation, the Tibetan people have created and developed a brilliant culture and everything in Tibet. But we know that Tibetans are actually a minority in Tibet. China says that we must build up a great wall in our fight against separatism and safeguard the unity and push for Tibet's basic stability toward long-term stability. But we know that this is ruled by force, not by consent. We know in Tibet it's actually poverty there and not prosperity. We know in Tibet that there's a policy of assimilating Tibet and eradicating the Tibetan language, not protecting it. So these are some of the things that we're disagreeing with. In Tibet, there's no real holiday. You know, there are these hotels that are going in Tibet, these 5-star hotels, and they're encouraging people to have vacations in Tibet, and that's a holiday there. But we know that occupation and repression is not a holiday. Another point, they say, China says they emancipated Tibetans, they freed the serfs, they say, but we know that it's just real oppression. China says that there's religious freedom, but we know there's religious suppression because all of Tibet's highest religious leaders had to escape and exile from Tibet. China says they're protecting the environment. They removed thousands of Tibetans, nomads, off their historical pasture lands under the guise of it. But actually we know that they're making a huge crisis for the environment in Tibet. Some of the worst environmental destructions, so bad that the Dalai Lama says that the environmental crisis in Tibet is worse than the political one. We also the colonialism in Tibet. We disagree of forcing the nomads off the land. We disagree that the railroad was there to really help Tibetans. Instead, it's accelerated the Chinese control of Tibet and taking over and making all these dams and other projects behind the Tibetans' backs. We disagree with Tibet. China says that although Tibet is rich with water and hydropower resources, that water resources are still one of the key factors that restrict Tibet's development. But the reality is that they just want to control all the water in Tibet, and so they can divert Tibetan waters from India and other places, from Vietnam and other places, and send it up north and to the other drier areas. We disagree with the way the Chinese treat the Tibetan dissidents. If you are a dissident in Tibet, unfortunately you don't live very long. We disagree with the way the government has dedicated a large amount of manpower, material, and funds to so-called protect the Tibetan culture. In reality, there's a second cultural revolution in Tibet. Just recently in the news, China announced that they sent 18,000 Tibetan youths to other parts of China to go and learn how basically not to be Tibetan. And finally, China says that Tibetans are happy in Tibet. They announced that Lhasa was awarded in 2010 the city with... They said that Lhasa was the city with the happiest people, but we know the reality is happiness cannot come by gunpoint. So that brings up the reasons why there's so much huge amount of dissatisfaction. So we go back now to the self-immolators of Tibet. Over 143 Tibetans have burned themselves alive that we know of to protest Chinese rule in Tibet. So for the next part of the program now, we ask you to light your candles now for all the people who died around March 10th, 1959. Please light your candles. You can also use your iPhone and use your light on your iPhone or your smartphone and shine this light at this time for the rest of the program. Or please start lighting the candles.